Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria Q. Kane.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. Let's get into this week's 6 shocking stories. So a 20-year-old chick and her boyfriend were driving along when suddenly he hit a culvert on the side of the road. The car went flying. They hit a pole 6 feet in the air. They went through 3 trees. The car started rolling. I mean, photos of this accident are absolutely horrific. Yeah, it really is. And this case, actually, so this woman had sent me this story, and it was so good that I decided to add it into my book, too. So we have half of the post in the gross room showing the accident and what her surgeries looked like after, and then the rest of it is in the book, which Maria will get to right now. Yeah, so obviously because of this horrific nature of this crash, first responders thought they weren't going to find any survivors, but shockingly, they did. So her boyfriend had been thrown 180 feet from the car, split his head open, and broke his shoulder. She unfortunately got pinned in the car, and because it was rolling, the sunroof broke and it trapped her arm and degloved it. So what is a degloving injury for people that aren't familiar? Well, just think of your skin being on your hand, or really your entire body as being a glove on your hand, right? So the skin can just come right off of your hand or anywhere on your body, leaving behind the soft tissue, muscle, and bone. So when you have a degloving injury, it's basically when the skin is just ripped right off of your hand or anywhere. So yeah, it could happen, and it could happen to your scalp. Just anywhere where you have skin, it could happen. All right, so because of how crunched the car was and the way her arm was trapped, the first responders were having they were having a really hard time getting her out. So this seems like worst case scenario to me. They decided that they had to amputate her arm at the scene because otherwise they weren't going to be able to get her out of the car. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, it happens sometimes that they have to do that because it's the only way to get a person out. And it just seems like the most horrible thing that a person would have to go through. She was alert enough to tell them what her parents' name was and their phone number. So she knew what was happening, you know? And yeah, I think at that time when you think that, oh, thank God I've survived this, you don't even really care at that point. So they had to send a surgeon in and do a field amputation is what it's called. So that's not that uncommon then, like, they have to do this enough that they know what to do. I wouldn't say it's common, but they have to do it. Yeah, I mean, there's situations where people just get stuck, and car accidents are probably the most common, but machinery and things like that, and if they can't cut off the piece and bring it with the person to the hospital that they're stuck in, then I mean, they don't take that decision lightly to do something like that, you know? I'm trying to just imagine being in this scenario. Like, do they give you any type of local anesthetic, or it just has to be done so quick? I'm assuming that there's ways to get around all of that. Um, I mean, she was stuck there, so it wasn't like, okay, this thing's about to fall on you right now and we have to get you out. I think they probably had some time to do something like that at the side. They had EMS and everything there, so they were probably able to do something, at least a local anesthetic, but maybe more, I'm not sure. All right, so after they cut her arm off, they took it with her to the hospital. I guess they decided at some point that they weren't able to reattach it. So she had to go through all of these procedures to get her arm formally amputated. What happens with her arm if they can't keep it and put it back on? They send it to us in pathology. That's what happens. So we get it in pathology, and that's something that is pretty common to get limbs from people. Either definitely legs are more common for gangrene for people with diabetes are the most common, but we definitely have gotten lots of legs and arms, especially when I was working in the city. People hit by a bus, people hit by a train, their arms and legs cut off. People with farming accidents are a big one. So yeah, we get the limb in pathology and we look at it and we describe the injuries that we see. And that's basically just for documentation, because a lot of these cases this might go to court if it was a problem with the car or if there was another person involved in the accident. So you just want to have a really good description of of where it was damaged, and if sometimes there's broken bones in the arm too, as well as the end of the margin being all torn up. So we describe that. So in this case, her arm was amputated, and so that's the case in the book of the picture of her arm, that there's grass and dirt attached to it. We just get, I've gotten legs from train accidents that have like grease from the train tracks on it, things like that. So we just mention all those kinds of things in our report. And then we usually keep the limb in a refrigerator for like a month, and then we dispose of it with the rest of the medical waste so it gets burned.
It's so interesting.
Incinerated. It is interesting. Another thing I should bring up is that oftentimes people, especially certain religions, people want to be buried with their body parts. So a funeral home will sometimes come pick up the arm, and they would have to pay for storage until they died so they could be reunited with their body part.
Oh, so at funeral homes, they'll just have like a storage facility of random body parts?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know if they do it at an actual, that was something that you're going to have to ask a funeral director, but they might have like an off-site storage unit. But yeah, that's something that people do.
Wow, that's so interesting to think about.
Yeah, it is. I mean, especially if you have a religion that they believe that your whole, people that are against tattoos and piercings and things like that, that they want your body to be buried whole, then that's kind of a big deal for them.
Yeah, I understand that. So afterwards, she was fitted for a prosthetic, but she decided that she was better off without it. I mean, she kind of has an amazing recovery story. Within, 2 weeks after she got released from the hospital, she was able to tie her shoes.
Oh, yeah. No, she was able, very soon after she got released from the hospital, she was able to tie her shoes and do so. And in the gross room, we have the video of her tying her shoes, which is just, it's amazing because, and then another thing she could do is put her hair in a ponytail.
I couldn't believe that. I could barely do it myself right now.
I know, right? It's so cool that she was, it really shows though, when you really want to do something like that, instead of just sitting there and having a pity party for yourself, like, just get up and do it. She did, and it's really amazing.
Yeah, and within 6 months, she went back to her job where she built airplane cabins. Think about that's nuts. Like, I don't know. I think her recovery story, this must have been absolutely so traumatic for her, and to have resilience like that and be able to retrain your body a whole new way of life after living 20 years only knowing, a certain way of doing things is kind of amazing.
Yeah, it is. And she was also saying that she had phantom pain. Do you know what that is?
I know we've touched on it in the gross room a little bit, but can you explain it?
Yeah, it's just when a person has an amputation and they still think that they are feeling pain. And like, let's say, for example, they get their leg amputated below their knee, but they still say they feel pain in their toes that don't even exist anymore. And it's a real phenomenon that people experience. And it's not only just pain, but sensation. Like they might feel like their toes are too hot or too cold when they're not even there, which is kind of insane.
Well, don't we have an article where we were talking about kind of the opposite, where somebody has this psychological feeling like they shouldn't have their limb, so then they get it cut off?
Oh, yeah. That's like a whole other thing that people just... I mean, there's differences because, like, we always talk about this when I used to tell Pop-Up he should get his leg amputated.
And everybody's like, what is wrong with you?
But because he said his foot hurts. His foot just hurts so bad, and he said it felt like a toothache all the time. And I would say, well, just get your foot amputated then and get a prosthetic. I saw it in the hospital, people just having like a semi-normal anatomical looking foot that got it amputated because they were in some kind of chronic pain that couldn't be fixed with surgery or whatever. That's a little bit different than people that just feel like they were born and they feel like they should be an amputee and they want to just cut off one of their limbs because they don't like their right leg or something. That's just a little bit whack. Like, I can't get down with that.
You guys have no idea what dinners are like in our household. We call you Dr. Death as a joke because you'll just be like, just cut your foot off. Or like, one day I'm sitting at my desk and she takes a picture of my foot and she's like, you have Raynaud's. And I'm like, okay. The diagnosis is out of control.
Yeah, but you know what? You could think that I'm extreme, but the guy sat around for years and didn't do anything because his foot hurt so bad, and that's not good to do that.
No.
And instead, he could have healed in 6 weeks and got fitted for a prosthetic and been walking around like millions of people do that have amputated limbs. So, you might think it's extreme, but I'm just being practical. Like, why are you so attached to your foot anyway? Like, if it hurts, just get rid of it.
I think a lot of people can't just get rid of a body part like that, but I kind of understand what you're saying. All right, this next one. So that one was called Kids These Days, if you want to look up the pictures. This next story is called Not Cooler. It was also submitted by Gross Remember. So this guy was riding his motorcycle, and in front of him, the driver had a trailer with a cooler on it, and it was one of those open trailer. Like, what are those things called? Do you even know? It's just like the trailer bed.
No, but they make me nervous because of stories like this because it's like a trailer bed and then people bungee cord shit to it.
Yeah.
And you're always just like, this is not going to end well. You just know that, right?
Yeah. So this guy has this cooler, like not secured well at all to this trailer that's on his truck. And he had one of those old school coolers on it, which was, today I feel like most coolers are made where the lids are still attached when you open them. But this looked like one of the ones from like the 80s or 90s, where it was like the old white lid that just like you took the whole thing off. So basically, because this thing is not secured at all, the lid flies off and hits the guy on the motorcycle. You would think he got shot. There is so much blood.
Yeah, it hit him right in the face.
It's nuts.
It is nuts. There's so much blood, and he's lucky he's not dead, honestly, because he was able to pull over, and it's kind of amazing because that really, maybe if it was a little bit harder, it could have really given him brain damage, knocked him off the bike, killed him. I mean, it's just so scary.
No, it really is. And I guess like when you get hit in the face, it just bleeds so much.
It is very vascular, the faces and the scalp. There's a lot of little blood vessels there that bleed. I mean, most people know that whenever they get an injury like that, it bleeds a lot. But it looks like, did it break his jaw or something? Or it looks like it broke some of his teeth. Yeah, it was really traumatic. And I mean, listen, I'm pretty anti-motorcycle, as all of you know, because there's just so many different things that could happen. And it's like, my dad always rode a motorcycle, and it's like, you're not worried. I'm not worried that my dad wouldn't be able to ride the motorcycle. I'm worried about everything else around you.
Yeah.
Things like this, things flying off. I mean, that would suck if it happened to a car. And that happens sometimes. And I've seen things like that just at the medical examiner's office, like when I was rotating there, of things like flying off of a car and landing into the windshield and things like that. So that could just happen, anybody driving. But when there's a car barrier in between you, you have a little bit more protection than just you against that item, you know?
Yeah, and I just don't think a lot of people, I feel like, just like throw stuff in their car or just aren't thinking about stuff, and they never secure it down properly, and you don't think of how horrible something like that could be, especially if you're on the highway and going really fast and it happens in just a split second.
Oh, every single time I'm driving, if I see anyone that has anything in the back of their car like that, I always go as far away from as possible from them, because I'm so scared of something like that happening.
Oh yeah, 100%.
You see that all the time, just people putting even if it's a mattress, it's soft, right? It's not going to hurt your car, but like, you don't need that flying in front of your car when you're going 70 miles an hour, because you know what I mean? Like, it will be a problem if you hit it or if you swerve and hit another car. So
I think we can all also agree that nothing is scarier than driving behind one of those trucks that's carrying a bunch of cars on it.
oh yeah, that I know. I hate that I know you're like the worst with that.
I'm always like, this is gonna be some Final Destination like thing happening with one of them.
Didn't we look it up though? Like, didn't we look it up to see if that happens? And then there was some cases of it happening, because we're just like, there's no way that this has never happened before, that these cars don't fall off of this thing.
No, it's definitely happened before, but it's not as common. Like, they're bouncing on there and stuff, and you're like, one chain has to break and this thing's go flying, right? But I think that it's definitely happened, but it's not common.
Another thing to note about this particular case is that it is really important that if you do ride a motorcycle to not only have a helmet, but to wear a face shield, because if he was wearing a face shield that was very hard plastic, it may have saved him in this case from getting at least an injury of this severity that was causing him to bleed and stuff. It may have hit his shield and it may have broke, and it could have even hurt him just as bad. But you should, I mean, stuff like rocks and little pebbles flying in your face could really hurt you, and especially could injure your eyes. So it's just important.
Yeah, I mean, we were just driving the other day and a rock hit your windshield all of a sudden. Or what was it, an acorn or a rock? I don't know, but imagine just being open and then that hit you.
Something about the design of my windshield, because Gabe was saying that too. It's just like I have like 5 nicks on my windshield from rocks and stuff. It just the angle of it or something must just be more prone to getting injured.
Yeah, that is very bizarre. I mean, I feel like it should be a really good glass, though, don't you? Like, it shouldn't be getting nicked that easily, but
Well, it does.
all right, let's get on to this next one called Dangerous Weapon. So this guy was sleeping at his son's house because he had a power outage, and as he was sleeping, he rolled out of bed and landed on this thermos that was laying on the floor. And during the fall, the plastic lid of this thermos, just to give you, I was having a hard time visualizing it before I saw the pictures. It looks like the lid of like a Stanley cup or something, like
Yeah,
like
or like I was gonna say like a Yeti coffee cup, that plastic
Yeah.
lid that squeezes into the cup.
yeah. So as he is falling and hits this thing, the lid breaks and it cut part of his ear off.
Yeah, it's so outrageous. Like a big chunk of his ear off. So the plastic, I don't even understand how it broke just with his body. Seems
Yeah,
because it's such thick plastic, you know?
yeah.
But I don't know, whatever angle it happened, but the plastic broke and it was so sharp that it amputated a chunk of his ear off.
Well, I think if those things, I'm talking about one particular day where I had one of those to go Starbucks cups, and my husband decided it would be funny to karate chop it off of the kitchen counter, and then it fell on the floor and broke like that. So maybe if they do fall from, maybe if it was on a table or something and fell and hit the floor, it maybe had like a little stress crack, and then him falling on it just did the job. I don't know, but
So the weirdest part of this story is that they decided in his family that they should take this chunk of his ear to the hospital, and they poured contact lens solution in a baggie and then brought it to the hospital.
could that do anything to help it?
No, I in fact would say that it may have made it impossible to reattach it, because I understand that you would think contact solution is like saline solution, but it's not. It has chemicals in it and antibacterial chemicals that kill any kind of germs to clean the contacts, right? So there is saline, but there's other things in it, and there's like hydrogen peroxide in it, right? And hydrogen peroxide, well, it would kill germs and prevent any kind of bacteria from growing on the chunk of ear. It also breaks down and the tissue and kills tissue. So they may have actually ruined the piece of tissue by putting it in the contact solution. You're really supposed to just put it on ice and you really should rinse it off, wrap it up in gauze. Anything that you have that's sterile at home would be okay, but you would put it in a bag and then put that bag on ice and bring it to the hospital. That would really be the best thing to do.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sucks because it's like, I would think maybe I was doing the right thing too, but I don't know. Like, I would panic
nobody
in that
has
situation.
nobody has like this list in the back of their head of like what happens if because nobody's thinking that anybody's going to have a body part cut off in front of them. But I'm just telling everybody here now, don't put it in contact solution. And the best thing is to just put it on ice and bring it and let them handle it. There's no magic chemical in your house that's going to save this thing. Like, and it could just be they couldn't reattach it, whatever. But I think that they fucked it up.
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, guess what? The Gross Room is going on sale tomorrow night, Wednesday night, and it is going to be only $20 for your first year of the Gross Room. And you will get to see thousands of posts that we have, videos, photos, lots of these cases that we talk about on Mother Knows Death, especially 6 shocking stories. You could see the case we just were talking about with the cooler incident and how much blood there was everywhere. You wouldn't believe it. And this poor 20-year-old girl who had to get her arm amputated, and you could see how horrific that crash was and watch the video of her tying her shoes. It's really amazing. So join tomorrow for only $20 for the first year.
So visit thegrossroom.com for more info and to sign up. Okay, in 2013 in Brazil, this woman gave birth to her son. So she noticed as a young baby he had really odd behavior, meaning that he would always have his arms crossed over his chest. When he started to walk, he would walk with his hands behind his back, with his hands in his pocket. I mean, that's kind of weird for like a 1-year-old to be doing. Remember Lillian used to, when she first started walking, she like crawled like a spider, like half of a leg up.
Yeah, that's so funny. Those videos are hilarious.
Yeah. So this woman realized that her uncle used to have similar mannerisms, but she just thought it was weird and stopped thinking too much about it because she's like, whatever. I mean, he's a baby. So around this time, she also started having dreams. And in her dreams, someone came to her and said that her uncle, who was murdered decades before this, that he was back, but as her son. So he basically was reincarnated in her son's body. But again, it was a dream. So she didn't think all that much of it. But she thought it was really weird. So then she did tell her brother that she had this dream. And he thought he also had intuition that the baby might have been connected to the uncle in some way. I mean, what would you even think if a family member was telling you this?
There's some stories that I've heard like this and when we finish telling you this, you're going to be like, okay, let's just think about this. And the only reason that we're bringing this up, this very non-scientific death story, is because it's actually part of a scientific paper where there's lots of examples of children who claim to be reincarnated as someone else. And when you think about a child telling a story and some of the similarities, you almost think there's no way, even if an adult tried to coach a kid to do all these things, that it wouldn't be so coincidental. And so let's get into more specifics of this particular case. They had said that the child had made 13 statements about his previous life, and 9 of them were correct.
Well,
And
correct
some of
meaning
them,
they resembled exact life experiences of the uncle.
yeah, so the uncle apparently was working at a job and someone came in and shot him to death. And the child made statements saying that he got shot in the head and that he was laying in water. So witnesses that were there that saw this uncle getting murdered said that he was laying in blood when he died. He just knew these very specific things. He knew that the uncle had a wooden rocking horse when he was a child. And then he knew that he had a horse that apparently the uncle had a horse and the mom had given it away or sold it and told him that, they never explained where the horse went. And he said he had a horse when he was a child that ran away. So,
well, that, and then he just started doing other weird things. Like when he was in between 3 and 4 years old, he would get underneath of a bicycle like he was fixing it like a car, and the uncle was a mechanic. So that's kind of also weird behavior for a 3-year-old to get underneath of a bicycle, be fixing it, and know all the mannerisms. And yeah, so they had the horse too. He also called his grandmother, who was the uncle's sister, by her childhood nickname that nobody called her except for him. And her daughter didn't even know that she had this nickname.
One of the weirdest parts of this case as well, if this isn't weird enough, is that he had this indent in his skull called an occipital concavity. And it resembles an area where a person would be shot. Like that's how the direction of the projectile would go through the skull. And it's just it's a very unusual defect to have of the skull, and it's just weird that this guy was shot in the skull and the kid's saying that he was shot and he has this giant indent in his skull. It's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, they were referencing in this scientific paper. So this was kind of like the main case they focused on in this scientific paper, but they were saying that overall, a lot of times these cases would most happen often in people associated with really violent deaths. It would more often than not be a male child. I think 74% of the cases were investigated in Asia. So that's really interesting that most of it was kind of like overseas from here, because just spiritually, people in the United States, like this family was Catholic and there's a lot of Catholic people in the United States. So they were saying people that are Catholic don't often believe in reincarnation. So the family was having a really hard time believing what they were hearing and how it was matching up. But some other Asian cultures really strongly believe in reincarnation. So they were looking into it a little further over there, which is so fascinating to think about. And in some of these cases, the child was born with some congenital anomaly that, like in this case, mimicked the way in which the person died in some
Yeah.
form of a scar, or if they were stabbed or shot, like in this case. It's so interesting.
It is. And if somebody said to me right now, like, what do you think about reincarnation? I would just be like, it's whatever. It's probably bullshit. But then when you hear stories like this, it's just like, it really makes you think. The kid knew that he said, I was shot by a theft. And here the guy that did shoot the uncle was someone that was stealing money from the company he was working for. It's just like, how would a child know this? And they interviewed the parents and they interviewed witnesses of the murder and everything, and they just don't. None of them were in the same room together to even tell the kid. The parents didn't even know a lot of this stuff. It's just so crazy.
Yeah, and they also said that most often children who claim these previous life memories spontaneously blurt them out between 2 and 5 years old when they start speaking coherently. And then as they get older, it gradually stops by the time they're around 8 or 9 years old. So that's
so
really
crazy.
Like, do you think they're starting to form their own memories that are like now taking over what they knew from this alleged past life?
I don't know, because then to say that you would have to say that this is 100% really happening, and a lot of things could just be coincidental, but I like that this was done in a scientific way, because they're really going through the proper motions of like how to prove that this is actually happening,
Yeah.
and this is not the only kid. It said it was part of a larger study called National Survey of Cases of Reincarnation Type in Brazil. It's pretty specific, but lots of different examples, and that one was just really interesting to me.
Yeah, it really was. All right, this next one's called A Series of Unfortunate Events. So on a cold night, this guy was walking home. He might have been a little drunk. He was walking home from some bars. So he had taken his gloves off at some point to text. As he was walking, he went to climb over a snow pile, slipped and hit his head. So his glasses and his phone go flying. And because I'm assuming he was a little buzzed, he didn't think to put his gloves back on and was searching for about an hour in the snow. Can't see that well because his glasses flew off. And he's looking for his phone and his glasses with bare fingers, just searching through the snow. And what happens?
He got severe frostbite.
The pictures of this are crazy. It literally looks like you took your hands and dipped them halfway in acid.
Yeah, I mean, it really can look nasty, and frostbite's a weird thing because sometimes it could kind of sneak up on you. You don't really know it's happening at the time, especially if you have darker skin color. It's really difficult to determine that your skin has turned a color it shouldn't be, kind of. And sometimes you could do too much damage that it can't be fixed. Luckily, in this case, they were able to bring him to the hospital, and they gave him something they put him in a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, which is, it just is to increase blood flow, because the blood flow is what heals any kind of wound, and bringing more oxygen to the site of the wound is what's going to make it heal. And fortunately, they were able to allow it to heal, and they didn't have to amputate his fingers, because a lot of times if you get severe frostbite, it ends up in amputation.
Every time I think of frostbite, I think of that scene in Mr. Deeds.
That was so funny when that happened.
Yeah, Adam Sandler's like toes are black and he has the butler like hitting them with what is that called? Like the poker for a fireplace.
Yeah.
That's all I ever associate frostbite with. But yeah, I mean, he is really lucky that he was able to save them. I can't, oh my God, it's so gross looking at the pictures of it. Just the way it looks like it hurts so bad.
So when you're outside and it's really, really cold out, your body's 98 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And when you're cold, your body has to stay that hot in order for you to live and your organs to stay alive. So what happens is that the body turns off all of the blood vessels basically in your arms, your legs, your nose, anywhere that's like far away from your heart that needs to be beating, right? To keep you alive. It kind of squeezes off all of those vessels. It's called vasoconstriction. So all the blood stays towards the heart to keep the body warm, because really it's like your body's way of saving your life, because you could be a torso. You don't have to have arms and legs to live, right? But unfortunately with that, when the blood isn't going to the arms and the feet as much, you're going to have an increased susceptibility of getting frostbite, which is why you get it on your fingers and your toes and the tip of your nose and things like that. So it's pretty cool, like from a biology standpoint, how the body kind of adapts to certain environments, but you really need to be careful in those situations because you can get frostbite and lose your fingertips, even your hands. I mean, it could get really bad.
Yeah, didn't we report earlier this year that at a Kansas City Chiefs game, it was so cold outside that so many people were getting frostbite and hospitalized for it?
Yeah, it's you just don't think. I guess you don't think about it if you're outside for that long of a period of time, but just think like your body has to be as hot as a summer day, right? 98 degrees. So if you go outside and you're outside for hours and it's 10 degrees out, I mean, this is going to happen to everyone, you know?
Yeah. All right, our last story is called Let Me Try and Pick Your Brain. Early in the morning one day, a man with schizophrenia broke into a construction site and stole a pickaxe. So I think everybody could imagine this is not going well. So shortly after, he took the pickaxe and just chose a random person on the street and started attacking them and hit them in the head.
Yeah, so he hit him in the head and then the pickaxe broke off. So it's on a wooden handle and it broke. So the guy then picked up the piece that was broken that had the axe on it and continued hitting him in the head with it, and then hit him in the abdomen a few times, and then hit him in the hand, and then just left it and walked away. They were able to call bystanders were there, and they were able to call the ambulance. But I mean, he was dead when they showed up. They pronounced him dead.
So because this is kind of like, this is like a sharp instrument, but it's big. Like, what kind of injuries does this cause exactly? Because would it be more like a stab wound because it's sharp? Or
It's a special kind of wound called a chop wound. So it's a combination of what you would see with blunt trauma. So with blunt trauma, you would see bruises and you would see tearing or lacerations. And then with sharp trauma, you would see really smooth borders of an injury. So think about if you hit someone with a baseball bat versus stab someone, the injuries would just look different. And this is kind of a combination of both of those things. So in the scalp, we saw the injuries. They looked like almost like knife wounds because they were very smooth and sharp, but also had bruising around them because of the heavy object hitting against the skull. And also this is really disgusting, but when the pick got underneath of the skin and the guy pulled it, it ripped the skin right off of the scalp, you know?
so disgusting.
And then also, so when they reflected the scalp and looked at the skull, there was a skull fracture. There were two skull fractures, one linear one that just looked like a line that was cracked, but the other one had a very specific appearance that you would see in blunt trauma, that it was a depressed skull fracture. So we talked about that. Remember we wrote up that case of that baseball player that got killed with the baseball like years ago?
Oh, Ray Chapman?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kind of skull fracture that you would see, that it's a very specific look. It almost looks like a cracked egg in a way, that all the pieces stay together, but they kind of compress in where this heavy object has hit. But interesting, when they took the skull off, they were able to see that there was like this hole in the center of it that looked like a V-shaped triangle, which was from the tip of the axe going through. So it's just a combination of both of those wounds. But the interesting thing is that that's not what killed him. Was the getting hit in the head didn't kill him.
So what did?
So when they opened, so he had a wound on the abdomen. He got stabbed in the abdomen a couple times, and when they opened him up, the pickaxe had went through his aorta, and he bled to death internally.
Isn't that nuts to think you get hit that many times in the head and that's not what takes you out?
Yeah, I mean, they didn't say anything in the report about him having any kind of major brain trauma or bleed from that. Obviously, he'd have some kind of injury from it, but it was very superficial as far as the damage done to the skull. It wasn't like a super big skull fracture that there were chunks of brain coming through and stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
It's just so scary to think that you're just like walking down the street and that something like that would happen to you.
Yeah.
And we hear about it a lot. Like, it's scary.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing you could do to prevent it either. It's just horrific.
I posted this case in the gross room yesterday, was it? Or Sunday maybe, saying that we were going to talk about it on the podcast today. And a couple people in the comments said that they were in a situation where someone beat them up. It just came up to them and punched them in the face or something when they totally unprovoked. Imagine that, just somebody coming up to you and beating you up like that. It's just so weird.
There was a thing going on a couple of months ago where I guess I'm probably botching this. I think that women that were influencers were walking around cities, like filming themselves talking or whatever, and then they were getting like punched in the face when they were in the middle of taking videos. So they had the attack like on film.
Yeah. Well, that's probably why they did it. I don't remember hearing about that, but
it's just horrific. Because Bethany Frankel said it happened to her, and a lot of people didn't believe her. But I don't.
Well, the scary thing is that when you just said that, I was like, yeah, that didn't happen. But
yeah,
who knows?
Who knows? But all right, thank you guys so much. Don't forget to submit your shocking story to stories@motherknowsdeath.com. And if you're curious about all the articles we're talking about, we send out a newsletter once a week, and you guys could sign up for that. The link for that is in the description of every episode.
And don't forget to leave us a review on Apple or wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to sign up for the Gross Room tomorrow night, $20 for the year. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology, so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.